welcome back to the channel. I do apologize that this is our first video in 2 weeks, but it has been a bit chaotic at work with all the functions that were arranged these past 2 weeks, as well as the actual teaching of the content at work. We are back with another video for grade 10 math core learners, and this would be where we focus on the factorization of the sum and difference of two cubes. Now this is the final type of factorization that you will learn. In previous videos we have discussed the factorization of perfect squares, trinomials, the highest common factor, and so on and so forth. But this is now a new type of factorization. So sit back, grab your pens and your exam pads and enjoy the video with us. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to explain to you the two most important things in factorizing the sum and difference of two cubes. So what we need to understand is the following. So if you look at this question I'm going to put on the board here, you'll see that both of them will have cubes for exponents. What you must understand is that the first thing that you need to do, and this is how you create your first bracket. So the first bracket. You need to cube root each of these two terms here. Remember that terms are split up by operations such as addition and subtraction. So we need to cube root. I just want to write everything down for you. Cube root each term. And the most important thing here is to keep the current sign that you've got here the same. So keep the same sign. Okay. Then, secondly, is for the second bracket, and this is what the second bracket must have in it. So let me just write it down. Second bracket, there we go. So the second bracket, or rather to form the second bracket, we now need to square the first and the last term. Okay, and then on that we then need to multiply. We need to multiply the terms in the first bracket. And when you do that, you obviously then need to change the sign for the middle term. The sign for the middle term. Okay, now this is something that you need to keep in mind. These are just notes. Everything that I've put down here for you now, I will implement on this question, as well as we'll obviously discuss questions that go from easy all the way to the most difficult type of question. Okay, so first bracket, cube root each of these. Remember, you need to form two brackets, two sections of that question. So to get the first bracket, we cube root that. To get the second bracket, we square the first bracket that we formed. And then the first term will be first in the second bracket, and the second term in that first bracket will obviously go to the last term in that second bracket. I will show you how that works. Then with that, we multiply the two in the first bracket, change the sign, and then put them in that bracket. So look here quickly. So this is how it will work. So to do the first thing, remember, cube root them. So here's our first bracket. I'm just going to do it over here. So the cube root of A will be A. The cube root of B will stay B. Or rather, the cube root of B cubed will become B. And then we need to keep the same sign. There we go. There's the same sign. Now for our second bracket, we need to square these, okay? And then what happens with that is the following. So a squared, or a rather, and if you square it, it becomes a squared. Then for the last part, or the last term here, we use this. So b multiplied by itself will become b squared. Okay? One thing that you must remember is that the sign at the back here, this sign, will always stay positive. Okay? So you just put it in there, it will always be positive. So that will always be positive. Okay. Then the sign over here will be the opposite of what the original sign was in the question, or what we had in the first bracket. So if there's a positive in the first bracket, okay, then obviously this sign over here would be the opposite of that. Remember your question said multiply the first two terms and change the sign. So a times b gives me ab, and change the sign. If there was a positive, we will change it to a negative in this case. Okay, just a few notes that you need to take note of before we start our actual factorization methods with all the questions. In this video, we will be looking at a few questions. I'll say maybe about 7 or 8 questions. Okay, and they'll be ranging from easiest to most difficult. But the most important thing that you need to understand is that you need to follow these rules. Okay, so off to our first actual question. So our first question looks as follows. We'll have 8x cubed, and that will be added to y cubed. Okay, remember, two brackets. Your first bracket, we cube root both of these to form the first bracket. So the cube root of 8x cubed becomes 2x. Okay, we keep the same sign, then the cube root of y cubed becomes y. Now we need to form our second bracket. Okay, the second bracket works as follows. Remember, we need to square this term, and that will be placed first. We'll square the second term, and the second term will be placed last. And to get the term in the middle, we multiply these two with one another and change the sign. Okay, so 2 squared and x squared will give us 4x squared. Then y times y would give us y squared. The sign at the back is always positive. Then the sign that comes over here between the first and the second term will always be the opposite of what is in the first bracket. So that would then become a negative. Okay? Then 2x times y gives me 2xy. And there your question is solved. Okay? That is the first question. Now let's go to the second one. Our second question will also be an easy one. This is just to warm you up for what is coming as we carry on with the video. So the second question will be m cubed, and we're going to go with a minus n cubed. Okay. First bracket always formed by cube rooting. So then we'll have m, bring down that sign, and we'll have n. Okay. Our second bracket is always formed by squaring these two in the first bracket. So m times m is m squared. Then n times n gives me n squared. Remember, the sign at the back is always a positive. And then what you must keep in mind is that the sign for the second term is always a opposite of what is in the first bracket. So it's a negative there, so it's going to become positive there. And then we multiply whatever is in the first bracket with one another. So m times n gives me mn for my second term in that second bracket. So there is the two easy questions. We'll be moving on to a bit more complicated questions. Okay, so here's the third question. Our third question looks as follows. So our third question consists out of the following. So we've got 54 x cubed, and we've got negative 16. Now if you look at the values over here, none of these are perfect cubes, okay? Which means we now need to take out a highest common factor. That is why the highest common factor factorization is so important. So what we can take out from both of these to make them perfect cubes, we need to then take out a 2. So we're going to take out a 2, and if you take out a 2, you will have the following left. 54 divided by 2 gives me 27, and we'll just add the x cubed, bring down the sign. 16 divided by 2 gives me 8. Now 27 is a perfect cube, and 8 is a perfect cube, which means we can cube root them and get a whole number as an answer, okay, without any decimals. So here we go for our factorization. So we leave the 2 on the outside. We are creating our first bracket now. So the cube root of 27 is 3. Cube root of x cubed is x. Bring down the sign. The cube root of 8 is 2. So there's our first bracket. Now we need to create the second bracket. So to create the second bracket, we need to square both of these and then put them in the bracket that follows. So 3 times 3 is 9. X times x is x squared. That's your first term in the second bracket. Then 2 times 2 gives me 4. But remember now that the last sign is always a positive. And your second sign here is always the opposite of the first sign. So that would be a positive. Now, we need to multiply these two with one another to create the second term in the second bracket. So 3 times 2 is 6, and we just add the x in, and there we go. All done and dusted and factorized. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Here's our next question. There we go. So 8a cubed plus 64, and we've got b cubed as well there. Okay, so if you look at this, you'll see that all of these values here are perfect cubes. So we can start immediately. We do not have to take out our highest common factor at all and create our two brackets. So first of all, cube root of 8 is 2. Cube root of a cubed is a. We bring down that sign, which is a positive. Cube root of 64 gives me 4, and the cube root of b cubed is b. Then, creating your second bracket, we obviously need to square both of these. So it would become 4a squared. And then the last term will then become, 16b squared. Because you need to say 4 times 4. Our last sign is always positive. Our second sign is always the opposite of the first one, so it's going to be negative. And now we need to multiply this with one another to get the second term. So 2 times 4 is 8. A and b will just follow, and there you factorized that question completely. Okay. Let's move to our fifth question of this video. I really tried to cover as much different types of questions as possible to ensure that you guys are okay when you study and so on, and to ensure that your minds are enriched so that if you come up with a challenging question, you are able to complete it as follows. Okay, here is our fifth question, and this one is quite a question. So, pay attention, let's go. So this one would be x minus y cubed, there we go, minus 64x cubed. So your first bracket will consist out of a whole bracket plus the additionals that are over here. So here's our first bracket. So it would be x minus y. Then remember to bring the sign down. The cube root of 64 is 4. We will then bring down the x, and there's your first bracket. This one is quite a question, if I can put it that way. Okay. Second bracket now needs to come from here. So we now need to square this and this to create the first and the last term in the second bracket. Okay. So we'll have then x minus y squared, and then for this one over here we'll then have 16x squared. So 16x squared. Remember that your last sign is always a positive. Your second sign, or rather, sorry, your first sign in your second bracket will always be the opposite of the first one, so that will also be positive. Okay? Then your second term in your second bracket will always be the first term here, and the second term multiplied with one another. So we will have it as follows. So you'll have you will have 4x multiplied by x minus y. And as you can see now, we've got one major thing to solve over here. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of these brackets here. So I will have the following: x minus y minus 4x. And obviously you're going to work with like terms in this regard to solve whatever you've got to solve here. Then, secondly, we now need to get rid of these brackets over here. So if I get rid of these brackets over here, I'll have the following. Obviously I'm going to say x times x, which gives me x squared. Okay. Then I will have y times y, which is obviously going to give me y squared. Okay. With a positive sign, because it's negative. Negative y times negative y gives me positive y. And then obviously if I solve for the middle terms, I will then get negative 2xy. Okay, that bracket is solved. There it is. Now we need to go solve this part of the question. So positive times a positive obviously gives me a positive. So it will become positive 4x squared. Then a positive and a negative is a negative. 4x times y gives me 4xy. Okay? Then I add this to the back. And now I need to solve the like terms in this bracket, and I need to solve the like terms in this bracket. Okay? If your foiling skills, especially over here, and your distributive property skills are not intact, you're going to struggle here. Okay? So then you might just get a mark for whatever you did there. From here, you're going to lose marks. So I would suggest that you sharpen up those skills, and then obviously your like and unlike term skills you need to know. Okay? That's stuff that they should have taught you from grade 7, grade 8, moving forward. Okay? Now over here, these two are like terms. So x minus 4x would obviously give me negative 3x with the negative y attached to it over there. So your first bracket is then solved. Okay? Then, second bracket, you now need to look here. Here's what do you call it? A like term with regards to that one and this one here. Because all of the variables look exactly the same. Okay? So now you'll say x squared, sorry, x squared plus 4x squared will give me 5x squared, and if you add the 16x squared, it should give you 21x squared with regards to that. Then these two should come in the second term. Okay, So negative 2xy minus 4xy will give me negative 6xy. And then obviously the y will be added at the back. So we'll put plus y squared at the back. No more like terms to sort out. So your question has been factorized fully. Okay. Please have a look at this question. This is the type of question that they'll ask to test you in a level 3 or level 4 situation. So you need to know a couple of things: how to FOIL, how to distribute, how to sort out like terms, as well as, most important, how to factorize the sum and difference of cubes. Okay. Moving on to our next question for this video. So for the next question, we'll be looking at the following. We just get another marker. Oh, there we go. So we will have the following. We're going to do a fraction, so we'll have p to the power of 6. Let me just get another marker. Sorry guys. Here we go. Okay. P to the power of 6, there we go. And we'll put that over 27. And then we'll subtract that from q cubed, and we'll put that over 8. So, remember when we cube root, we will cube root the entire fraction there as well. Okay, so starting with our first bracket, it will look as follows. So the square root, or rather, sorry, the cube root of p to the power of 6 will then give me p squared. Of course, all you do is you take the 6 and you divide it by 3. Then the cube root of 27 will give me 3. Bring the sign down. The cube root of q cubed will give me q. And then of 8 will obviously give me 2. So there's your first bracket. Okay. Now, we need to take this first term and then obviously the second term to create the first and the last term of the second bracket. And then obviously multiply them to create the second term. So, p squared multiplied by p squared will give me p to the power of 4. 3 times 3 is 9, so there's your first term. Obviously our second sign over here is the opposite of what we've got there, which is a positive. Then we need to multiply these two with one another to create the second term. So p squared times q would give me p squared q. And then 3 times 2 will then obviously give me 6. Our last sign here is always positive. And then we need to square this in order to get the last term over here. So q times q gives me q squared. And then 2 times 2 gives me 4. And there you go. We have factorized it fully according to what they've asked us to do. Okay, let's go to our next question. So our next question over here looks as follows. So it is 54 x to the power of 5y minus 250 x squared y. So if you look at this question, it's the same as, I think it was the third question that we did. And remember, with the third question, we took out the highest common factor to ensure that we are able to cube root when needed. So in this case, we're also going to do an HCF. And the HCF that we were taking out is equal to the following. So 2x squared, and we'll take out a y as well. And when you do that, you'll be left with the following. 54 divided by 2 gives me 27. If I take away 2 there, I'll be left with x cubed. If I take a y away, then there's nothing. Sign comes down. 250 divided by 2 gives me 125. If I take the x squared away, and if I take the y away, there should be nothing left. with regards to what is attached to the 125 in this case. Now I can use this bracket to create the second bracket that I need over here. So 2x squared y we leave as is. We're going to leave this bracket not as what we had it. Sorry about that. So first bracket that we need to create is obviously to take these two terms and cube root them. So the cube root of 27 is 3, and of x cubed gives me x. This sign stays the same, and the cube root of 125 is equal to 5. Then the second bracket, we obviously need to square these to create the first and the last terms, multiply them to create the second term. So 3 times 3 is 9. X times x is x squared. Remember, this sign over here is the opposite of the sign in the first bracket. 3 times 5 gives me 15. We add the x. The sign right at the end is always a positive. And then we square this term over here to give us the next term that we need there. And that would be 5 times 5, which gives us 25. And there you go. We have factorized it fully in this case. Okay. Okay, so let's quickly look at our next question in this case. And this will be our final question to ensure that we've covered all the topics. So last question, and this one can be quite tricky if you do not know what you're doing. Okay, so 2ax cubed, there we go, plus 3a, or sorry, rather b x cubed minus 2ay cubed minus 3by cubed. If you look at this question, I can tell you now this is a lot to do with regards to grouping in factorization. So grouping, which means we will have to then do a sign change in this thing as well. But first we have to take out the highest common factor. And the first highest common factor that we'll take out is obviously the x cubed. The second one, y cubed over here. Okay, so x cubed, or what's going on? X cubed has to go, we all know that. In that bracket, we will then have 2a plus 3b, close the bracket. The sign over here is always a positive. If you looked at the other grouping factorization videos that I made, you know that this has to be positive. Okay? We take out the y cubed. The sign that is here is attached to this term, so it has to go into the bracket. There we go. Now you've created your groups. Before you do anything else, you need to understand that this bracket and this bracket has to be duplicated, meaning they have to be exactly the same. So you have to change the signs here. And the way that we do that is we multiply by a negative from here all the way to the back. And that will change the signs. So what we'll then have is x cubed, 2a plus 3b. We'll have minus y cubed, open bracket, 2a plus 3b. And look here, these two are identical. So that is normal sign changing by grouping factorization that you should have learned in grade 9 already. Okay, now because these two are the same, we take them and we write them as one bracket, which is 2a plus 3b. And then these two are written in one bracket. Just like you would do when you are grouping or applying grouping factorization. What you now need to keep in mind is that these are perfect cubes. So we can factorize further with regards to the sum and difference of squares. So the first bracket will stay the same. But the second one, we are going to create two more. So, cube root of x cubed gives me x, the sign comes down, cube root of y cubed gives me y. Close the bracket. To create the second bracket, we need to apply what we've done this whole video already. So, we square the first one, that gives us x squared. The sign over here is the opposite of what we have here, so that becomes a positive. Multiply these two, it gives me x, y. Then, the sign at the back is always positive. We square the y and that will give me y squared. And there you go. You have factorized it fully. Two different types of factorization methods have been implemented in this question. Well guys, that is it for today. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for growing the channel. Thank you for spreading the word. We really do appreciate it. We will ensure that we have more videos coming in. Like I said in the beginning, I do apologize for not posting anything in the past 2 weeks. Things have just been going crazy at work. I will make sure that I catch up everything that you've missed out on to ensure that you stay up to date, stay ready for your test and for your homework, and to enrich your minds. Thanks again for tuning in to Mr. Math. Until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.